What if the person you thought you were protecting was actually protecting you? The night was unusually quiet. The rain outside tapped softly on the windows of the small white house at the end of Willow Lane. Inside, Emily sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the half-empty coffee cup on her nightstand. It had been 6 months since Mark left. 6 months of unanswered calls, unopened letters, and a silence that felt louder than thunder. Her world had stopped, but time didn't care. It just kept going. She looked toward the clock. 11:47 p.m., almost midnight. She should have been asleep, but her mind refused to rest. Every corner of the house still carried a trace of him. The jacket still hanging by the door. The faint scent of his cologne that refused to fade. It was like living with a ghost who hadn't died. Down the hall, Ethan's room was dimly lit. Her 12-year-old son had changed since his father's departure. The laughter that once filled their mornings was gone. He no longer raced down the stairs or begged her for pancakes. He just moved through the days quietly, like a boy carrying a weight too heavy for his small shoulders. Emily closed her eyes, trying to stop the tears before they came. But that night, something felt different, like the air itself was waiting. She pulled her blanket close, ready to force herself to sleep, when she heard it. Soft footsteps on the wooden floor. "Ethan?" she called gently. No answer. The footsteps stopped right outside her door. Then came a slow creak as it opened. Ethan stood there, wearing his faded blue pajamas, his hair messy, clutching the old stuffed bear his dad had given him years ago. "Mom," he whispered. Emily sat up quickly. "Sweetheart, what are you doing up? It's almost midnight." He stepped inside but didn't move closer. His face was pale, his eyes wide but calm. "I had a dream," he said. "But it wasn't just a dream." Emily frowned, reaching for the lamp. "What do you mean?" Ethan's voice trembled slightly. "Dad was in my room." The words hit her like cold water. She blinked, unsure if she heard him right. "Ethan, honey, your dad isn't—" "I know," he interrupted softly. "But he was there, sitting on my chair. He looked real, Mom. He was smiling." Emily felt her heart race. She didn't believe in ghosts or signs. She was too practical for that. But her son's expression was so certain it made her doubt everything she thought she knew. She stood, walked over, and knelt beside him. "You must have had a bad dream. It's okay, we all have them sometimes." But Ethan shook his head slowly. "No, Mom, he talked to me." Emily froze. "He had talked to you?" Ethan nodded, his eyes glistening. "He said something I didn't understand. He said, 'Tell your mom to stop waiting.'" Emily's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't told anyone, not even Ethan, that she still waited. That she still checked her phone at night, hoping for a message from Mark. That she still wore her wedding ring, even though she'd told everyone they were separated. "Sweetheart," she whispered, trying to steady her voice. "Are you sure that's what he said?" Ethan nodded again, more firmly this time. "Yes, he looked right at me." He said it twice. Then he smiled and disappeared. Emily stared at him, trying to find logic in something that made none. Kids dream. Kids imagine. But Ethan wasn't the kind of boy who made things up. He'd always been quiet, honest, serious beyond his years. She walked him back to his room, tucking him under the blanket. The rain outside had turned into a steady rhythm, and thunder rolled faintly in the distance. She brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "Try to sleep now," she whispered. "Dreams can feel real sometimes." Ethan looked at her, eyes half closed. "Mom," he murmured, "Dad said he still loves you." Her chest tightened. She didn't reply. She couldn't. Back in her room, she sat on the bed, shaking. "Tell your mom to stop waiting." The words repeated in her mind like an echo. Was it her subconscious speaking through her son? Or was it something she wasn't ready to believe in? Emily reached for the drawer beside her bed. Inside was a single envelope, Mark's last letter. He'd left it the night he packed his bags, told her not to read it until she was ready. She'd never opened it. Maybe she didn't want to know what it said. Maybe not knowing was easier than facing the truth. She pulled it out now, running her thumb along the seal. For a moment she almost tore it open, but fear stopped her, fear of finality. Once she read it, there'd be no more, maybe. No more wondering if he'd come back. She placed it back in the drawer and closed it. Outside, lightning flashed through the curtains. Emily turned off the lamp, trying to rest, but her thoughts wouldn't stop. Tell your mom to stop waiting. It wasn't just the message, it was how Ethan said it. His tone, his certainty, the way he repeated it like it wasn't a choice, but a command. At 2 a.m., she woke again to a sound, the faint creak of a chair. She turned her head toward the corner of the room. Ethan's bear was sitting upright on her vanity chair. She hadn't touched it. Neither had Ethan. Her heart raced. "Ethan?" she whispered into the dark. No answer. She got up, slowly walked across the room and picked up the bear. Its button eyes stared blankly, its fur soft but worn. She placed it on her nightstand beside the letter. For the rest of the night, she didn't sleep. She sat there, watching the rain slide down the glass, replaying her son's voice in her mind. By morning, sunlight had replaced the storm. She walked to Ethan's room to wake him for school. He was still asleep, peaceful now. On his desk, she noticed something new, a drawing in pencil. It was their family, her, Ethan, and Mark, standing by the lake where they used to go every summer. Above them, written in a child's shaky handwriting, were 3 words. "Don't wait, Mom." Emily's hands trembled as she touched the page. She hadn't told him about the lake. Not once. For a moment she looked toward the window. The morning breeze carried the faintest scent of Mark's cologne, the one he used to wear on Sundays. Her throat tightened. Maybe it was her mind playing tricks, or maybe Ethan wasn't dreaming after all. She stood there, staring at that drawing, her pulse quickening with something she couldn't name. Fear, hope, grief, all tangled together, because deep down, she knew what came next would change everything, and she wasn't ready for what her son might say next. Can you forgive someone who's already gone? The next morning came too bright, too calm for the storm that had passed inside Emily's heart. She stood by the kitchen counter, pouring cereal for Ethan, but her hands shook. Every word her son had said the night before kept echoing. Tell your mom to stop waiting. She tried to smile when Ethan entered, rubbing his eyes, his hair messy as always. But something in his gaze had changed. He didn't look like a child who'd had a nightmare. He looked like someone carrying a secret. "Morning, sweetheart," she said softly. "Did you sleep okay?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah, Dad came again." The spoon froze in her hand. "What?" He sat down calmly, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "He didn't stay long. He just said he was proud of me, and that I should remind you about the letter." Emily's stomach tightened. "What letter?" she asked, even though she knew. Ethan shrugged. "The one he left for you." Her breath caught. She had never told him about that letter. No one knew except her. She had hidden it in her bedside drawer since the day Mark walked out. How could Ethan possibly know? She forced a smile. "Eat your breakfast, honey," she said quickly, turning away so he wouldn't see the panic in her face. After dropping Ethan at school, Emily drove straight back home. She sat on the edge of her bed and stared at the drawer. The envelope was still there, sealed and untouched, its edges slightly yellowed now. For years, she'd imagined what it might say. An apology, a confession, maybe a goodbye. But now, it felt like a living thing. Something waiting to be heard. Her fingers trembled as she lifted it. "The letter," Ethan had said. She tore it open. The paper inside was neatly folded, Mark's handwriting familiar and sharp. She took a deep breath and began to read. If you're reading this, it means I couldn't stay. I've lost the man I promised to be. I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope you live again. Please don't wait for me." Her chest tightened. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. She read it again and again, as if searching for something between the lines, a reason, a clue, a promise. At the bottom, one last line. "You'll always have a part of me. Take care of our boy." Emily pressed the letter against her chest. She wanted to be angry, to hate him for leaving, but all she felt was exhaustion. Years of waiting had drained her of everything. That evening, when Ethan came home, she sat beside him on the couch. "Sweetheart," she said carefully, "how did you know about the letter?" He looked up from his homework. Dad told me. Emily swallowed. When? Last night, Ethan said. He said you needed to read it. He said you'd find peace after. She stared at him, her heart pounding. Ethan, are you sure it wasn't a dream? He shrugged. It felt real, like when you talk to someone on the phone but they're not really there. You can still hear them. Emily didn't know what to say. She had no explanation that made sense. And yet deep down she didn't feel scared, she felt seen. Like Mark was trying to tell her something he couldn't say in life. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that usually hurt, but now it felt different. Not empty, but waiting. Around midnight, she heard soft footsteps again. Ethan? She called. He peeked into her room, eyes half asleep. Mom, I couldn't sleep, he murmured. She lifted her blanket. Come here. He crawled in beside her, his small hand resting on her arm. After a moment, he whispered, Dad said he's sorry for making you cry. Emily's heart broke all over again. Did he tell you that tonight? Ethan nodded. He said he never wanted to leave. He said he loved you too much to keep hurting you. She couldn't hold back the tears this time. She turned away, biting her lip to stay quiet. Ethan, half asleep, said one last thing before drifting off. He said you'll understand when you see the light. Emily froze. The light? She whispered. But he was already asleep. The next morning, sunlight streamed through her window, brighter than it had been in months. It fell directly on the letter lying on her nightstand. The reflection from the window made it glow faintly, as if someone wanted her to notice it again. She picked it up. This time she noticed something she hadn't before. On the back of the envelope, faintly written in pencil, were 3 words. Don't wait anymore. Her hands trembled. She had never seen that writing before. For the next few days, little things started to happen around the house. Her favorite song from their wedding playing softly on the radio without her turning it on. The scent of Mark's cologne near the hallway. Ethan talking softly when he was alone in his room. She asked him once, Who are you talking to, Ethan? He smiled faintly. Dad, he says you're doing better. Emily's eyes filled again. What else does he say? That he's proud of you, and that you're not alone. She reached for his hand. Sweetheart, sometimes when we miss people, our hearts make them feel close. That's okay. Ethan nodded, but his tone was calm, certain. It's not just my heart, Mom. He's really here. Emily wanted to believe him. A part of her already did. That night, she stood outside on the porch, holding the letter in her hand. The stars above shimmered faintly. She whispered into the darkness. Mark, if you can hear me, I got your message. The wind stirred gently, brushing against her face, and for a brief moment she could have sworn she heard his voice. Not loud, but soft, right beside her ear. Thank you. Emily gasped and looked around, but there was no one there. Just silence and the faint rustle of leaves. She went inside, her heart racing but lighter somehow. Ethan was asleep, clutching his bear, his face peaceful. She kissed his forehead and turned off the light. But before leaving, she noticed something else. The lamp on his desk flickered once, then twice, before settling into a steady, warm glow. It was almost as if someone wanted her to see it. She whispered, "The light." Her eyes widened. That's what Ethan had said. You'll understand when you see the light. Emily's pulse quickened. It couldn't be just coincidence. She stood there in the soft glow, the letter still in her hand, realizing that something, or someone, was guiding her toward something she wasn't ready to face. Because maybe Mark's message wasn't just about letting go. Maybe it was about finding something. Or someone new, and though she didn't know it yet, that someone was closer than she thought. Do we ever really move on? Or do we just learn to live with the emptiness? The days that followed were quiet but strange. The air in Emily's house felt lighter, like something heavy had finally lifted. But she couldn't tell if that was peace or simply exhaustion. Every morning she'd wake to the faint smell of Mark's cologne near the hallway. And every night the lamp in Ethan's room would flicker softly, like a heartbeat. It wasn't frightening anymore. It was familiar. One evening, she found Ethan sitting by the window, sketching again. His pencil moved quickly, his eyes focused. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" she asked gently. He looked up and smiled. "Us, at the lake." But this time, someone else is there. Emily leaned closer. There were 3 figures in his drawing: her, Ethan, and a man standing beside her. She frowned. "Who's that?" Ethan shrugged. "Dad said I should draw him. He said that's the man who's going to help you smile again." Her stomach tightened. "Ethan, what do you mean?" He looked up at her, calm and sure. "Dad said he's coming soon. You'll know when you see the light again." The phrase echoed through her. When you see the light. She didn't understand it. Not yet. But she remembered that strange moment in Ethan's room, when the lamp flickered twice before settling into a warm glow. Maybe it wasn't just a coincidence after all. That same week, a moving truck pulled up across the street. A new neighbor. Emily watched from her porch as a man stepped out, tall, brown-haired, with tired eyes and an easy smile. He looked about her age, maybe a little older. She didn't think much of it until later that afternoon when the doorbell rang. "Hi," the man said, holding a small box. "I think this was delivered to my address by mistake." She smiled politely. "Oh, thank you." He extended a hand. "Daniel Hayes, just moved in across the street." "Emily Carter," she replied, shaking his hand. His grip was gentle, but steady, the kind that felt grounding somehow. For the first time in months, she noticed something simple but warm: connection. Over the next few days, Daniel waved whenever she stepped outside. Once, when her fence latch broke, he offered to fix it. "You don't have to," she said, but he just smiled. "I don't mind. It'll give me something to do besides unpack boxes." While he worked, Ethan stood beside him, watching closely. They talked about baseball, school, and the stray cat that liked to sleep near the porch. Daniel laughed easily, a sound that filled the air in a way Emily hadn't realized she missed. Later that evening, when Daniel left, Ethan turned to her and said quietly, "That's him." Emily blinked. "Who?" Ethan smiled softly. "The man from my drawing." She stared at him. "Ethan, you just met him." He shook his head. "No, Mom. Dad told me about him before he came." The words sent a chill through her. "Ethan, don't make things up." "I'm not," he said simply. "Dad said Daniel will make you laugh again." That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She replayed Ethan's words, Daniel's smile, and Mark's message. Don't wait anymore. Could this really be what he meant? Could Mark somehow be guiding her toward a future he knew she needed? The next day, she bumped into Daniel again outside the grocery store. He was buying paint, she was getting milk. They ended up walking out together. "You know," he said, laughing lightly, "I was going to ask if you wanted to come by for coffee sometime. No pressure, just neighbors talking." She hesitated. Her instinct was to say no. For years, she'd closed herself off, convinced that opening her heart again would betray the memory of Mark. But then she remembered Ethan's voice. Dad said it's okay, so she nodded. Coffee sounds nice. That Sunday morning she went over. His home was simple but warm, sunlight spilling through half-hung curtains. He made her laugh. Really laugh, for the first time in what felt like forever. When she returned home, Ethan was waiting on the porch. "Did you have fun?" he asked knowingly. Emily smiled. "I did," he nodded, satisfied. "Dad said you would." She looked at him in surprise. "Ethan, do you still talk to him?" "Sometimes," he said. "Not as much anymore. He says he doesn't need to stay as long now that you're smiling again." Her eyes filled with tears, but they weren't sad ones. It was the ache of something healing. That night, after putting Ethan to bed, she stood by her window, looking at Daniel's house across the street. His porch light was on, a steady golden glow. She whispered softly, "The light." Maybe this was what Mark meant all along. Maybe love didn't end. It just changed its shape. But that peace didn't last long. One evening, as she was helping Ethan with homework, he suddenly looked up and asked, "Mom, did you tell Daniel about the lake?" She frowned. "No, why?" Ethan pointed to the photo frame on the table. It was one she hadn't seen before, a picture Daniel had given her earlier that week. It was a photo of him and his late wife standing by a lake, the same lake where Emily and Mark used to go. Her breath caught. "That's impossible," she whispered. Ethan tilted his head. "Dad said you'd understand now." Emily's pulse quickened. Coincidence. It had to be coincidence. But deep inside, she knew better. The next morning, Daniel knocked on her door. "Weird question," he said awkwardly, holding his phone. "Do you happen to know Willow Lake? I found this photo while unpacking and realized it's the same one in your hallway." Her hands went cold. "Yes," she whispered. "That's our lake." Daniel frowned. "That's strange. I'd never even heard of it until I moved here." For a long moment, they just stared at each other, both unsure what to say. Finally, he smiled faintly. "Maybe it's just one of those small world things." Emily nodded slowly. But when she turned, she saw Ethan standing behind her, watching. He smiled, not mischievous, not scared, peaceful. That night, she sat beside Ethan's bed. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "if Dad talks to you again, can you tell him something for me?" Ethan opened one eye sleepily. "What?" "Tell him I'm not waiting anymore." Ethan smiled faintly. "He already knows, Mom." She kissed his forehead and stood to leave. But before she could turn off the light, Ethan said softly, "He said one more thing." Emily paused. "What is it?" "He said this isn't goodbye. It's just time." Her heart skipped a beat. "Time for what?" Ethan looked at her through half-closed eyes. "For you to remember how to love again." Emily stood there, frozen, watching her son drift back to sleep. The house was quiet, but not empty. And when she glanced out the window, Daniel's porch light flickered twice, just like the lamp in Ethan's room had that night. Sometimes love doesn't disappear. It simply finds a quieter way to stay. The world outside was slowly shifting into spring. The air was lighter, the trees greener, and for the first time in years, Emily felt her heart beating in rhythm with the world again. It had been weeks since Ethan last mentioned his father, and the silence felt peaceful, not painful. The shadows in their home had softened into sunlight, and laughter had begun to echo in small corners once more. But peace, Emily had learned, often carries questions that refuse to fade. One morning, as she packed Ethan's lunch, she found him humming a tune she didn't recognize. "What's that song, sweetheart?" she asked. He smiled. "Dad taught me. He said you used to love it." Her hands froze midair. "When did he tell you that?" Ethan shrugged casually. "A few nights ago, but he said it's almost time for him to go." Emily's chest tightened. "Go where?" Ethan looked thoughtful. "He said you already know." That night she couldn't sleep. The house was still, the kind of stillness that makes your heart too loud. She stared out the window at Daniel's porch light, glowing softly across the street. It flickered once, twice, then held steady. The same pattern that had followed her since Ethan's first dream. She whispered into the quiet, "Mark, is that you?" A breeze swept through the open window, rustling the curtains, and for a moment she felt it again. Not fear, not sadness, just presence. A warmth that brushed against her like a sigh. The next morning, Daniel stopped by. "Hey," he said, smiling. "Ethan told me about the lake you used to visit. Thought maybe you'd like to go there again, with him and me." Emily hesitated. That lake held too many memories. First kisses, broken promises, the last fight before Mark left. But she saw the hope in Daniel's eyes and the excitement in Ethan's, so she nodded. "All right, let's go." They drove out that weekend. The road curved through pine trees and sunlight until the water finally appeared. Still, endless, and golden in the afternoon light. Ethan ran ahead, laughing, his shoes crunching against the gravel. Emily stood for a moment, frozen between past and present. Daniel placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "It's beautiful here," he said softly. She nodded. "It always was." They spread a blanket on the grass, unpacked sandwiches, and watched Ethan skip stones across the water. The air smelled of pine and nostalgia. For a long time, Emily didn't speak. She just listened, to the ripples, to Ethan's laughter, to the quiet peace that felt almost like forgiveness. Finally, she said, I used to come here with Mark. We thought this place would last forever. Daniel didn't look away. Forever doesn't always mean together, he said gently. Sometimes it just means it mattered. She turned to him, surprised by his words. The same ones Mark had once said during their last argument. Her eyes softened. You sound like him, Daniel smiled faintly. Maybe we just understand the same kind of loss. For a while they sat in silence. Ethan's laughter echoed over the water, and the sun began to dip lower. The sky turned orange, then pink, then gold. Emily felt a strange calm wash over her, as if someone was standing just behind her, watching, smiling. Then Ethan called out, Mom, look! He was pointing toward the horizon. A single ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, falling directly on them. Warm, glowing, steady. The light, Emily whispered. Her heart began to race, but not with fear, with understanding. This was it, the sign Mark had spoken about through Ethan. The light wasn't a warning. It was a blessing. She closed her eyes for a moment and let the tears fall. They weren't tears of grief anymore. They were gratitude. When she opened her eyes, Daniel was looking at her with quiet concern. You okay? She smiled through her tears. Yeah, she whispered. I think I finally am. That evening back home, the house felt different. Not emptier, just more peaceful, as if something had settled. She tucked Ethan into bed, and as she turned to leave, he said softly, Dad says thank you. She paused at the door. For what? Ethan smiled sleepily. For listening, her heart swelled. She turned off the light and whispered, Tell him. I'm grateful too. In her room, she stood by the window once more. The stars were bright, and across the street, Daniel's porch light flickered. Once, twice, then glowed steady again. She smiled, whispering into the night, I see it now. Mark, the light. The next morning, everything felt new. The air was warm, the coffee smelled sweeter, and even the silence felt kind. Daniel dropped by to return a book she'd lent him. But when their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them. Not romance yet, not certainty, but the quiet beginning of something gentle. You're glowing, he said, smiling. She laughed softly. Maybe I finally let go of something I should have a long time ago. He tilted his head. Or maybe you didn't let go. Maybe you just learned how to hold it differently. His words hit something deep inside her. That love doesn't vanish. It just changes its shape. That night, as she lay in bed, she dreamed of the lake. Mark was standing there, smiling, the sunlight spilling across the water. He didn't speak this time. He didn't need to. His eyes said everything. You did it. You lived. When she woke, her cheeks were wet, but she was smiling. Ethan was already up, making breakfast with Daniel, who had dropped by early to help fix the fence again. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching them laugh together. The sound filled the house, bright, alive, whole. For the first time in years, Emily realized she wasn't waiting anymore. She was living. But as she turned to walk away, she noticed something on the hallway table, Mark's old letter. The envelope she thought she'd left inside the drawer. Only now, there was something new written across the back in faint pencil. 3 words. Keep the light. Her breath caught, and for a long moment she just stared. Then she smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek, whispering, I will. She placed the letter beside a vase of fresh flowers and walked out into the morning sun. Behind her, Ethan's laughter echoed through the house, and as the sunlight touched the letter, the pencil words shimmered faintly, as if someone was still watching.